Alrighty, 7th graders, welcome to the very first video lecture by Mr. Barnes. I know it's kind of weird, but we're just going to use this as a learning opportunity, so stay tuned for any pieces of advice I give you, like when should we take notes. So if I tell you to write something down, that's probably a good hint. We're just going to keep moving and keep the dynamic flowing, so if you have any questions, write them down, and then you can ask me in class the next day. All right, this is a picture of an artist's rendition of the Crusades. There are different artistic perspectives. As we look at art history, you'll see different paintings of what it was like, and some of them are very accurate. So typically, the clothing worn during the Crusades were long flowing robes. Even the horses had some kind of protective or decorative garment to determine whose horses were whose. And then you'd see a lot of big, prominent crosses on all the clothings and the shields. And as armor would change over the years, so does the crusade looks. You can see here's another couple images, some artist renditions. But the thing I really want to talk about is the maps. All right, so let me break it down for you. You'll notice this map includes Europe and the Middle East, or at least part of the Middle East. Let's see, over here you have the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, that would later become the country of Spain. Today it's modern Spain and modern Portugal. Portugal's this little itty bitty guy. Okay, so Spain and Portugal. So this protrusion, that's the Iberian Peninsula. And above that we have France, which is named after Francia, which is part of the remnant kingdom of who? Charlemagne. That's correct. So Charlemagne and his Carolingian dynasty would eventually grow into the Holy Roman Empire, which then is later revived. When you see this over here, this is a different kingdom, okay? When I say Holy Roman Empire, it was mainly conceptual during Charlemagne's rule. It wasn't actually called the Holy Roman Empire, but he was the Holy Roman Emperor. He was the very first. Charlemagne was crowned in 800 AD as the very first Holy Roman Emperor, and that was just to legitimize his rule over all Western Christian Europe. Later, after he divides his kingdom up with his three grandsons, that's the Treaty of Verdun, or Verdun. We would see Middle Francia, West Francia, and East Francia, and those would later become the nation states of Italy, France, and Holy Roman Empire, which becomes Germany. Okay, literally the guy's name is Louis the German, so you get the idea. And then above that we have England, also known as Angleland at that time, thanks to the Anglo-Saxons. I know that a lot of this is review, but these would eventually become the European nation states. Okay, they are states, they have borders, and then within them they are nations with common culture, history, experiences, language, etc. Okay. Now you'll see over here in the answer key there are 4 arrows. Each one labels a different crusade. 4 arrows, 4 crusades. Okay, that's accurate. There are only 4. The first one is really actually the only successful crusade, but we'll get to that. In the purple, you see that that's all Christian land. And then in the gold or yellow color, that is, as you can see, Islamic territory or Muslim territory. Muslim, this word Muslim, just means anybody who claims the Islamic faith. Now, typically at that time, if you claimed the Islamic faith, you were genetically a Arab. Okay, you are of Arab descent, and that is that comes from the Arabian Peninsula, which is this guy down here. Okay, the Arabian Peninsula, and that's where Islam actually started. You'll see that on a map coming up. This map right here that I have pulled up, this is just another map similar to the one I just showed you. I just wanted to zoom in on Jerusalem here, and also the Byzantine Empire. Okay, Constantinople is the capital of the Byzantine Empire, and the Byzantine Empire is constantly going to be at war with the growing Islamic forces. Okay, so as the Muslims expand this way and the Byzantine Empire shrinks because Rome is shrinking in general, they're going to be constantly at war defending. And it's this plight, it's this desperate need, actually, that causes the Byzantine Empire to send word to the leadership over here, to the Pope. Okay, he sends word to the Pope, and he says, "Hey, we really need some help." So that's what basically kicks off the Crusades, and so they'll come over and they'll fight back. You'll notice that the green, this green color, actually goes all the way down into Jerusalem, and that's actually the goal. So at the very beginning, the First Crusade, the goal is to recapture Jerusalem. Jerusalem at this time is known as the Holy Land, because Jesus walked around in that time in Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem. So that's where he was crucified. That's where he gave his Sermon on the Mount. You understand that is where Jesus did his everyday ministry, and that's why it's a holy land for anybody who claims the Christian faith. In fact, even today, Christians would like to take pilgrimages or trips to Jerusalem to honor the places where Jesus walked and to gain a deeper appreciation for their Christian heritage. And so, if that's what you desire today, you're not much different than some of these Europeans, some of these knights back then who would love to go see where Jesus walked. Now, there's some other motivations mixed in there, and we'll talk about that. The Crusades were not completely perfect. In fact, a lot of the death and destruction caused by the Crusades cannot be justified. Okay, it was done in vain. One second here. All right. So you'll notice the green is Christian lands and the orange are Muslim lands. And Muslims originate from Islam. So where did Islam come from? That's our next question that we're going to be asking ourselves. Okay, so Muslim starts with a guy named Muhammad. He's a prophet in 570 AD. He gets a vision in 610 AD. And in his vision, supposedly from the angel Gabriel, Muhammad claims a new model of religion, which he then titles Islam, and that translates to submission. And basically what he does is he takes Christianity, he takes Judaism, and he kind of turns them inside out and focuses on certain aspects and then adds a whole bunch of incorrect information on the end. He said, he basically received more information in his own mind. He received more information that added to the Bible because he considered himself to be a prophet. He believed that he was the last prophet, in fact. So we know that this is not correct. And if you look at the Arab beliefs of Allah and you compare them with Christian Judeo views of Yahweh, or God, as we refer to in the Christian faith, they're very, very, very different gods. Okay, so even though Islam claims that they have the same origin, Allah and God, or Yahweh, are very different. Okay, their characteristics are very different. You'll notice this is the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, and this is where Islam originated. Okay, in this square on a global map. You can see with this color coding that Islam expanded first and foremost between 622 and 632 under Muhammad, and then under the first four caliphs, those are Islamic religious leaders, it expanded, and then eventually under the Umayyad caliphs, which starts the Umayyad Caliphate, it expands all the way into Spain. Okay, this would become modern Spain. Okay, so the Iberian Peninsula is now occupied in this map. It's occupied by Arabs. Now, North African Arabs go by a specific title. They're not just Arabs, and they're not just Muslims. They go by a specific title called Moors. M-O-O-R-S. So let's go back real quick. Okay. Starting in 711, the Muslim Moors, North African Muslims, started conquering the Iberian Peninsula and even threatened to conquer Gaul, which would later become Francia, so Charlemagne's kingdom, okay, any descendant of the Carolingian Empire. The modern nation-state of France in its earliest days was still fighting Islam, okay? The Franks were the first to push the Moors out of Gaul, Francia, and then the task fell to the Spanish once the Spanish became a nation-state, but that doesn't happen for a while. So for the most part, it's the Frankish kingdom that is going to be battling the Muslim Moors in the Iberian Peninsula. And their goal is to kick them out of the Iberian Peninsula and back into North Africa. Okay, they want to secure Western Europe for Christianity. And this ongoing Reconquista, okay, this ongoing Reconquista literally translates to reconquering. They're reconquering the area, the territory. And it starts in 722 AD, and it goes approximately 700 years to 1492 AD. Okay, so lots of kingdoms change within that time period. But for that entire time, they're trying to remove Muslim powers from the Iberian Peninsula. In fact, the Reconquista period it happens within the Crusades. Some scholars even say it's the beginning of the Crusades. Others say it's towards the end of the Crusades. But in total, it kind of starts and ends before and after the Crusades. The Crusades are a much smaller time period in between. So let's talk more about the Crusades. By 622, the Arab nations were on the rise. They had conquered part of the old Roman Empire that includes Egypt, Syria, Persia, and Asia Minor. Now, Persia also has a remnant empire, okay, how do I say this? A leftover empire. You know, when you have dinner and you have leftovers in the fridge. Well, when Persia, the empire, fell apart and broke into pieces, one of its remnants actually was reborn on the side and was able to maintain some rule, and that was called the Sasanian Empire. You're not going to need to know that for the test, but it's S-A-S-S-A-N-I-A-N, I believe, Sasanian Empire. And that is kind of the empire in which Islam originated in the Arabian Peninsula, the Sasanian Empire. And they spread outward, and eventually, under Muslim Islamic belief, the Sasanian Empire will fold into what becomes caliphates. And a caliphate is a dynasty led by a caliph, and a caliph is a specific religious leader of Islam. Okay, so we're going to see a transition there. The first dynasty or caliphate is the Umayyad dynasty. Here's the original Islamic. I'm sorry, I misinterpreted. Sorry, misinformation. So this is not the first. The Umayyad Caliphate, I meant to say, is the largest caliphate. So this is when Islamic territories expanded across the most territory. You can see how far they spread. This picture describes the very first caliphate, even going back under Muhammad himself. So you see the different colors. This area right here is where Islam started, and then eventually it spread outwards. And then under the Umayyad Caliphate, it makes its way into the Iberian Peninsula, which then kicks off the Reconquista. All right, so I've said it a couple times. The official definition is right there for you. I know we've talked about this in class with most of you, so I'm just going to give you a couple seconds to see it on the screen. You can pause it if you need to. You can rewrite it if you want to. And now we're going to move on. All right, so the first is the Umayyad Caliphate. Then it's the Abbasid Caliphate. And eventually it's the Seljuk Empire, which is slightly different. The Seljuk Empire is when the Crusades take place. It's during this empire that Muslims will go to war with the Byzantine Empire. So it's the Seljuk Empire versus the Byzantine Empire. And you can kind of see it. It's really blurry, but this is the Byzantine Empire. Okay, and they retreat all the way up until Constantinople, which is literally where my red dot is. That's Constantinople. The Seljuk Empire is the red, or the orange, sorry. Okay. The Seljuk Empire blocked access to Christian holy sites to Catholics on their pilgrimage. Okay, there's a word I use, pilgrimage. That's the idea of traveling to the Holy Land to see the holy sites where Jesus walked. Now, if you're a Christian, you're traveling to the holy sites, and now you can't, you'd be reasonably upset, okay? Especially since it was conquered by a pagan religion, okay? This is what begins the start of the Crusades. Not to mention you have some leadership in the Byzantine Empire writing to the Pope in the Western Roman Empire, or the remnants of the Western Roman Empire, and they write to the Pope and say, hey, we need some help. Could you come help us out? And the Pope sees this as a perfect opportunity to gain more power for the Roman Catholic Church. And so he implores and encourages and advocates to the Western European nation states like France and England and Germany to send soldiers into the Holy Land for battle. Okay? Eventually, the Byzantine Empire will fall to the Ottoman Empire later on. Here's another definition for pilgrimage, in case you need that in writing. Go ahead and pause it if you need to. Write it down. The Crusades, a series of military expeditions. That's a good word, right? It's a big journey with a purpose. And they're from parts of Europe to the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. How did the Crusades begin? And we're going to talk about some motivations coming up. For centuries, Christians had been traveling to the Holy Land, also known as Jerusalem, and this was allowed under the previous caliphates. But the Seljuk Empire decides they don't need that tourism anymore. They don't need tolerance laws anymore. In fact, they're going to shut all Western influence out of the Islamic territory. This changes everything, okay? The Seljuks cut off access to Jerusalem and the other holy sites. Not good. In 1095, Pope Urban II called for a crusade to liberate the Holy Land. Pay attention to that name, Pope Urban II, okay? You're going to want to know that for your review questions as homework. Pope Urban II called for a crusade to liberate the Holy Land and defeat what he called the infidels or heathens. Now here are a list of motivations and beliefs, and I think these are really important to talk about. Why would people want to go fight in the first place? This war seems like it's way out of place. It's not in their own territory. It's completely religiously motivated, but maybe there's also some human, fleshly motivations mixed in there. For starters, if you go and you conquer territory, what happens to the conquered land? Some of it goes to the Catholic Church, but other pieces of that land is rewarded to the knights who fight. It's a reward, and so people are going for wealth and land. They're trying to improve their overall status as a knight. For the Roman Catholic Church, the main motive was to expand its own influence. Okay? How can it expand not just territory in the Middle East, but get this, as these European soldiers and knights went to go fight, many of them didn't come back, and so in their wills they would leave their land to the Roman Catholic Church. And so as these soldiers would go and die for the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church would also collect on their land. So it's growing its empire. Religious rewards. Okay, I mean, this is an honest belief. They believed that if they fought for God in battle, they would be rewarded in heaven. What does that look like? Some people believe that you can earn different crowns in heaven, different rewards. But the Catholic Church takes this way out of context and way out of proportion, and they actually promise that God, not even God does this, but that God has invested in the Pope the power to grant pardon for other sins. Okay, this is a incorrect view of grace. Theologically, this is bad. And we'll talk about this later on in the Renaissance and Reformation, specifically the Reformation. But the Catholic Church has been misinforming its followers, its Christians, and so they think, if I go serve in battle, it will help me in my walk. Okay, my walk with the Lord. I'll be pardoned of certain sins. And then obviously the last one is fame and money. Okay, now what's it say here? Urban wanted to get Europe to unite, and the best way to do that was to give them a common enemy. That's true. That's another reason. So we might actually have more than 4 reasons here. So common enemy you could see as one reason. The Crusades were marketed by the Catholic Church as pilgrimages with a touch of warring on the side, but pilgrimages, okay? So it's an experience, adventure, religion. People legitimately believe they would be rewarded in heaven. Okay, we talked about that one. Land and money, and that pretty much covers it. You'll need to know these for the test. By the time European troops arrived in the Holy Land, where Israel used to be, the Muslim Fatimids had already captured the land from the Seljuks. Okay, so there's a switch in territory there. The First Crusade was really the only one that was successful. By 1100 AD, the European nobles held Antioch and Jerusalem, and that means we had captured the Holy Land by 1100 AD. All right, let's see what this map tells us. Whoops. Okay, so the yellow represents the Seljuks over here. The Byzantine Empire has different colors of growth. And you can see this is where the Fatimids are. So the Fatimids started in Egypt, and they actually captured territory from the Seljuks. So there's a switch in ownership. There were 4 crusades total, and they got weirder as they progressed. Now, we won't go into all the fine details of how each one got weirder and how the goals changed for each one. But ultimately, the Crusades failed to re-establish Christian rule in the Holy Land. Only the First Crusade was successful in capturing land and maintaining land. The subsequent Crusades 2 through 4 were not successful at all. So in the end, we did not win. How did Europe benefit? This is the pretty big thing, a big takeaway. Okay, so what were the motivations and what are the benefits or results? So get ready to write these down. For starters, this is probably the biggest one. After the Crusades, knights and all these vassals to the kings, okay, all the nobles, barons and dukes and things like that, they start bringing back all of their wealth and literature, learning. Okay, so Constantinople had been a huge center of learning. There were universities there. It was a place of trade, so you have interaction with Muslim powers, Islamic powers, even Chinese influence through the Silk Road. There was a preservation of learning during the Dark Ages. So even though Europe went into a Dark Ages, the Byzantine Empire actually did a great job of preserving a lot of the Greek and Roman information, the literature, the knowledge, the achievements. And so as our European knights and nobles retreat back to Europe, they go back home, they bring a lot of this learning with them. So this is a huge catalyst, okay? It ignites learning in Europe. And eventually it will dig us out of the Dark Ages and out of the medieval times into the Renaissance and the Reformation and the Enlightenment period. Basically, it's the Kickstarter for modern Europe. Okay, so the Crusades, although it be terrible, lots of death and destruction, one of the added benefits was that it changed Europe forever. We also see an increase in trade, spices, silk, and fur. But the key here is not the items being traded, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually the boost in trade that created a new middle class. Okay, this is another thing that helped us dig ourselves out of the medieval times. As we see a growth in the middle class, we see centralization take place where the king gains more power and the local rulers lose power because the middle class has actually gained power. So those local rulers from feudal times, they start to lose power, and we're going to get monarchies again. Monarchies in France and Germany and Italy, and those monarchies are going to lead those nation states. Manufacturing improvement. Okay, we have new achievements, new technology. The idea of factories is pretty new, okay? And I'm not talking about factories with metal and assembly lines. This isn't the 1900s. Factories at this point were basically run by power, okay? Wind power or water power. And they would harness that power either through a water mill with a big water wheel that's connected to a river, or a windmill that has blades that are being powered by the wind. And then it would turn, and that would crank some gears, and eventually you could crush grain, or you could do whatever you need to with that harnessed power. But these are the earliest factories. Here's some more technological innovation. We see in Europe the horse collar, water mills, windmills, the compass. There's a cannon, a crossbow, and armor. Cannons actually originate from Chinese gunpowder, and a lot of that happens in the cross-cultural mixing in the Middle East. In fact, the Middle East technological innovations are pretty impressive. Muslim scholars improved upon Aristotle's scientific method. Aristotle from ancient Greece. In astronomy, Islamic scholars were already adjusting the incorrect geocentric model of the solar system. Geocentric means the Earth is at the center. We now know that the sun is at the center. So in astronomy, scholars were already fixing that. They also improved the original Greek astrolabe that helps them to determine navigation through the stars. In literature, you see the story of Aladdin, but Aladdin is just a small part of a greater saga called the Arabian Nights, which includes characters like Aladdin, Sinbad, and Ali Baba. And then later, the Ottomans, the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East, would develop a much more powerful form of gunpowder. Okay, and that's going to change warfare altogether. A couple other cool things you can see here in Europe. We see the development of mechanical clocks, glasses, concave and convex lenses in the 1400s. And then also later on, we see the agricultural revolution. Let's see where we're at. Okay, we are actually about to stop. I will pick up with some review on what you just watched in class tomorrow. And then we also just have an abbreviated section 4 and 5 to cover, and that will cover the rest of our content for the unit. And that's going to be taught on Wednesday of this week, okay? Now, I do have a couple questions for you, and this will be written down so that you can answer them and turn those questions in. So I know that you watched the video and you are an incredibly observant student. Okay, so here's our first question. Question number 1, where did Islam originate? Okay, what landmass? Question number 2, what is the Holy Land? Give me specific territory, okay, specific country. Question number 3, what pope first encouraged the Crusades? Give me his name. Question number 4, what Islamic empire ruled during the Crusades? Question number 5, what are the 4 to 5 motivations for the Crusades? And question number 6, what are the 3 biggest results or benefits of the Crusades? All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. I hope that was informative and maybe not super boring, but do your best to answer those questions, and I look forward to telling you some more fun things tomorrow. Thanks.